Hi, everyone. I'm Charlie Stott, and we're going to be starting up here at the noon hour, just opening up early. Welcome, everyone, to today's presentation, AIA San Francisco Code's presentation. All right, good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Charlie Stott. I'm co-chair of AIA San Francisco's Committee on the Environment. It's also known as COTE. Next slide, please. This event is produced by COTE and co-presented by AIA-SF. And today's presentation is entitled Net Zero and Community Positive, Justice by Design. Today's presenters will share their design journey through and toward a truly empowering design process, one that prioritizes environmental and social justice and recognizes their interdependence. This session will include a panelist presentation as well as interactive opportunities for participants to brainstorm and reflect on their own projects and processes in the context of justice by design. Next slide, please. First, we'd like to recognize our silver sponsor for today's event. It's PAE Engineers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next slide. We'd also like to thank our AIA-SF sustaining benefactors and our next slide, please. Our AIA-SF sustaining sponsors who help make programs like this possible throughout the year. Next slide, please. This program is registered with AIA Continuing Education Services for continuing professional education. Next slide is our event description, which I'm assuming you guys have read already. So we'll just pass over this to the next slide. And if you are an AIA member and you're going after the learning units and credits, today's learning objectives these objectives will qualify for 1.5 learning units of HSW for AIA Continuing Ed. And our next slide, please. Some housekeeping details for Zoom before our introductions. This is going to be a super interactive event today, and we want to hear from all of you during this program. There'll be a little description by the presenters after my intro here about the Miro sessions that are included. The chat will be open on Zoom, but the Q&A will, I believe, be closed. So try to pop your questions and your chats into the chat box, not in the Q&A. That would be appreciated. And if you got any questions, also put those in the chat, and I will collect those and either do our best to answer them live or at the end, time permitting. And also, so everyone knows, this program is being recorded, and a video link will be posted on the AIA SF Code webpage when that information becomes available after the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers today. The first of three is Quinlin Messenger. He is creative director and design justice steward at Just Collaborate. Quinlin believes design is a tool for social and environmental transformation, and that systems can be and should be just for all. Understanding the historical, current, and future context of projects is integral to his process and his approach, integrating co-creative and eco-centered practices to address the deepest challenges our communities and ecosystems face. Quinn's creative identity is rooted in his African American, Native American, and Jewish heritage. He channels and honors with these legacies through design justice and engages communities and projects with a focus on healthy living, social and environmental empowerment, and legacy cultivation. In tandem, Messenger works closely with groups to facilitate conversations and experiences around race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Our second panelist today is Gregory Fischer. He's a designer and creative facilitator with Plus One and is a member as well of Just Collaborate. Gregory has extensive experience helping clients uncover and articulate their stories, translating insights into transformative opportunities. His human-centered design process and systems thinking approach help to broaden perspectives and guide design teams toward innovative, responsive solutions. Gregory uses his design role as a catalyst. He's not the author, but a spark, igniting powerful opportunity. In his nearly 30 years leading diverse and transformative projects, including the Epicenter and the future home for the East Palo Alto Library, Gregory remains actively engaged in the community through advocacy, workshops, and friendships. And lastly, but not leastly, is Kirstin Weeks and her firm BioStudio, who are proud members of Just Collaborate. Kirstin is a naturalist, a builder, and a leader in regenerative design and urban ecology, working with teams to create sustainable, resilient built environments where people and nature thrive together. Kirstin started BioStudio to offer innovative, collaborative, climate-positive consulting on mixed-use, office, civic, academic, and landscape projects. She's passionate about healing, promoting well-being, and environmental justice by making design connections with nature and through nature. So without further ado, welcome everyone, and I'll hand off to Quinlin Messenger, who will kick off today's presentation and give you a little background about how we're going to be interacting today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Kirstin, I'll call on you before we jumpstart things to kind of help give an outline of how we're going to be running through stuff, and I'll tag back in.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everybody. So glad you could join us today. We want to hear from you today. We want to make sure that this is something that is relevant to the work you're doing and allow you to be part of some brainstorming. So we're going to invite everybody to come in onto the screen like you would in a regular Zoom meeting, as opposed to a webinar format. So what you're going to see is Claire is going to invite people in order to make the webinar act like a regular Zoom. Claire has to invite you in as a panelist. Don't worry, we're not asking you to give a presentation. It's just going to allow you to come in and put your video on, or if you want to be on but have your video off, you can just turn off your camera like a regular Zoom. So just wanted to give you a briefing that you're about to see an invite to join as a panelist come on your screen, and please accept that so that you can be in the meeting with us as a participant. And back to you, Quinn.
Great, thanks, Kirstin. I see Cindy has joined us and others are jumping in. We appreciate you all being flexible as we're trying something a little bit different maybe from the norm. But yeah, as Kirstin said, feel free to keep your cameras off. Also feel free to turn them on. we're happy that everyone's here today and able to join in any capacity. So before we jump in, I'm just going to share a little bit about Just and where it kind of comes from, some of our roots. So for me, as I founded Just, it really started with my ancestors. I didn't know any other place to really start. And for me, my father's parents are above and my mother's parents below. So on my dad's side, my grandfather Leroy and my grandmother Ethel May raised my dad's family in the heart of the Mississippi Delta during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. So, you know, growing up as a Black family in the South. Clarksdale is known as the Crossroads. For those of you who might be familiar with sort of the progression of American music, in many ways, Clarksdale is seen as kind of a birthplace for that. Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil at the Crossroads, and that is Clarksdale, Mississippi. So Delta blues led to blues and jazz and rock and hip hop and the Harlem Renaissance. So in many ways, I take a lot of pride in where I come from in that capacity. Also in Clarksdale is the Messengers Club. This was founded by my grandfather in the early 1900s. It's the oldest and longest running African-American establishment in the city. If you ever go through Clarksdale, please stop through. But it's great. It's a place, you know, early on when I was growing up and visiting my family there, where I really understood and was kind of face to face with the power of community, the power of tradition, the power of capacity that you can get from, you know, sharing space together. On my mom's side, my grandfather Jesus and my grandmother Judith were interesting characters. My grandfather was indigenous Mexican, Yaqui Indian, and my grandmother Judith was a Russian Jew who moved to the States. And after she came to the States and became an activist and a teacher, she fell in love with the Lakota tribe and became a prominent figure within the tribal nation. I was actually adopted into the Lakota tribe when I was 13 years old. This was on the day of my naming ceremony. My grandmother with the tribal elder who named me Howard Badhand. So when considering where my family kind of comes from, represent many different walks of life, but as a result also represent many different sort of struggles and injustices. And from the conversations that we had around the table, you know, social justice was always at the core of much of what we were discussing and speaking about. So I think that very much kind of set its roots early on. You know, my grandmother Judith also always shared this phrase with us when we were growing up, that we were all children of the same mother, meaning Mother Earth. So this is a photo of the Simeon Mountains in Ethiopia, which is, you know, through genealogy and DNA is thought to be the birthplace of humankind. So this connection to the earth and the planet has always been very important to me, and that was also a part of my upbringing. This is a photo of the Tecosha Institute in northern New Mexico that was founded by my grandmother about 40 years ago, a little over 40 years ago. I now, as through Just, we host workshops there, and we also have a sweat lodge on the land. And I have worked very closely with my uncle, who's an ordained spiritual guide through the Lakota tribe, in helping to facilitate sweat lodge ceremonies. So I've acted as a firekeeper as well as a waterman. And in doing so, you know, when you're in the sweat and these hot stones are brought in, water's placed on them and the steam is rising and the drum is beating and the song is being sung and you can feel the sage brush underneath you, you can't help but know where you are. You're deeply immersed within the environment. And I think it's through this that understanding, you know, these realities, that we are a part of this larger sort of system, that we also have a responsibility in terms of our own sort of impact within it. So I think that's very much where environmental justice kind of played a key part in sort of the thinking as I started to evolve as a designer. So when we think of all these factors, whether it's, you know, the outbreak of COVID, we're looking at, you know, disproportionate incarceration of people of color, we're looking at wildfires. People might think that these are disparate sort of considerations, but in my mind, they all have to do with justice. So that's what really led me to found Just. And Just is an initiative to realize an equitable future, and it really is looking at creating a mutual respect between Mother Earth and people for a shared sort of integrity. So Just has different ways of working. We have Just Design, and that's really looking at kind of actualizing in physical form the Just Initiative through architecture. We also, through Kirstin's work with BioStudio, leading our sort of sustainability and resilience sort of planning. And we also use within Just Design our process community engagement, which Gregory has been key in helping to lead. And we have Just Collaborate, which Gregory and Kirstin are both a part of. It's our sort of network of trusted experts and leaders from different fields. And lastly, we have Just Act. And Just Act is really looking at cultivating values for projects and also building capacity for self-determination. This can be through curriculum development. It also can be through engagement strategies itself. And that's some of what we would like to be talking with you all about today are some of these strategies that we've used before in the past and how it's really kind of influenced some of the work that we're currently doing. So I'm going to pass it over to Kirstin right now to kind of talk a little bit about the relationship, that I had kind of mentioned, but to expand on it a bit further.
Yeah, thanks, Quinn. So I think Quinn's introduction just sets this up rather clearly that there, a lot of us are focused on equity and justice in design. A lot of us are focused on sustainability and fighting climate change. I just want to make the point that the two are fundamentally intertwined. And a few years ago at a Living Future conference, I had the pleasure of seeing Jamie Markle, the Colombian American youth climate activist who's pictured on the screen here, speak. And she gave an incredibly clear and inspiring talk about how the climate crisis is the grand culmination of all the societal injustices that have been building up for centuries, and that we see Earth being treated in the same way that women and people of color have been treated in an extractive way. And on the flip side, we also know that it's populations who are already vulnerable, who and have experienced injustice and discrimination, who are already bearing the brunt of climate change impacts and are likely to bear disproportionate impacts in the future. So it's really, I think that in our work together, Quinn and Gregory and I are very focused on, environmental and social justice work, marching along totally as one effort. So let's see. I think next we have Mentimeter next, right, Quinn?
Yeah, so I think what we're going to do now before we continue on introducing you to East Palo Alto and the projects that we would like to share with you all today is we're going to do a little Mentimeter. It's a little online sort of collaboration sort of platform. So Kirstin has posted a link into the chat. I'm going to switch the screen share over to Kirstin, but everyone please, if you can, click the link that was just dropped into the chat and feel free to share here with the prompts.
Yes, thank you, Quinn. So I've dropped this link in the chat and we're inviting you to click it and then to answer the question that is posed to you there. And that question is, in a few words, how have you seen environmental or social injustice or both showing up in the built environment, in buildings, in cities? What are the issues that are front of mind for you, or even just one or two issues that are front of mind for you that you'd like to see improved through our work? I'm gonna.
And you can do multiple answers, so
yes.
Feel free.
You can answer more than once, and we're gonna watch it show up on the screen, and it's fun. So we see some people commenting on kind of issues that need to be improved, other people putting in ideas for solutions. All those things are fine. They're concerned about equity or access, concerned about inequality in education. And we'd like to see community gardens. We'd like to see community archives. We'd like to see youth access. Keep them coming.
I think it seems that there's kind of an education through line that's starting to appear a little bit too, maybe for areas of improvement. Ooh, this is a fun one. This is building fast. I feel like we need the Jeopardy music playing in the background, but we can imagine. Nice. Hmm. Hmm.
Now, if
Yeah,
anybody,
it's interesting.
go ahead.
I saw food desert pop up there. Yeah, you know, this notion of food insecurity is definitely something that we're kind of not necessarily grappling with one-on-one, but you'll see in some of what we're framing for East Palo Alto is something that we definitely were encountering there. So yeah, that access to resources is definitely something worth noting. This is great.
Funding homelessness among students, affordable housing,
Nice.
gun violence as a concern, and safety. I think safety is an interesting word. It means different, there are different, there's physical safety and kind of sense of safety as well. And that means so many different things to different people. That comes up in our discussion later. Does anybody want to comment on what they put in or clarify they put in? I see some good stuff emerging about maybe gentrification and maybe that green buildings are showing up more for privileged groups than for those without privilege.
Yeah, I see the water issue in there as well. I think, that is a continuing and evolving, I'm not sure where people are calling in from, but the three of us are all based here in the Bay Area. So East Palo Alto early on, as you'll see, dealing with sea level rise are some key considerations, but also, yeah, water access and those, access to healthy and clean drinking water as well. So these are, I think part of our purpose in doing this as well is so that we can collectively see that, these are issues that are pervasive throughout many different places that we're all starting to become aware of and deal with, and how can we as designers really advocate for change. So we're hopeful that we're able to expand on this a bit further. Yes, Carl, I agree. It is a bit limiting, only having 25 characters, but feel free to speak up. And also, there'll be more time in here to chat, but we should ping Mentimeter and say we need more space. So this is good.
All right, shall we carry on?
Yeah, I think we can carry on here. So yes, thank you all. We'll have another opportunity to engage with you. So I'm going to bring my screen back up here and 1 second here. Hopefully you're all seeing the screen here. Gregory, you want to walk us through these next few slides here related to East Palo Alto?
I'd be happy to. When we first got the call to work on this project up in East Palo Alto, Quinn and I were down, well, all of us were down in Los Angeles. And East Palo Alto was a place that was completely unfamiliar to me. And the minute we started looking into it, we sort of realized, wow, this is not, this is going to require, there's going to be some distance between our understanding and who and what this place is and what's needed. So a little bit of background for you from what we've learned. It is a place, first I want to say, because instead of just listing all the negatives here, it is a place of tremendous pride and diversity. There are a lot of cultures represented. They're somewhat siloed, but because of the diversity of cultures, you have a very strong presence of history and diverse perspectives. And also within the communities, values are really present and they're very clear as drivers. The other thing that really stands out there, possibly because of what they've been through as a community, is the real passion and fire that's palpable. So East Palo Alto has been subject to zoning and redlining. It's part of the reason that it was created in the 80s. Sitting on the bay, it's a low-lying land, so it's highly susceptible to sea rise. There's a lot of environmental racism. In other words, Silicon Valley kind of built itself on the backs of East Palo Alto by putting fairly dirty, manufacturing plants there. when East Palo Alto started itself, it wasn't very astute in the ways of politics, and it wasn't given water rights, so that's very limiting to their economic growth. Let's see, there's one of the really big operating factors is they're surrounded by pretty much the wealthiest, the greatest wealth in the nation, with Menlo Park and Palo Alto right at its shoulders. So those folks kind of use East Palo Alto as essentially a pass-through and a cheap resource. But that all sets up, sort of a mindset of, the folks that we've been working with in that community, walking into a space where there's a lot of collective pain and resentment, and a lot of mistrust. We can go to the next slide. It's also a place where, the community gets tired of hearing the negatives and they want solutions. But the problem is a lot of the solutions that come in from outsiders who aren't really truly committed to the place. Leadership comes in and rotates out, as they go on to better jobs elsewhere. So they come in green and then leave when they're of value. East Palo Alto began as an agricultural community, so the lots are quite large and they're also quite cheap. So there's the land value there is quite high, but the prices are quite low. So gentrification and displacement. There's a tremendous amount of food insecurity. There are very paltry grocery options there, not to mention the fact that like 90% of the students in public schools qualify for free or reduced lunches. The education system is woefully under-resourced. Stanford just helped the school system launch a successful lawsuit against the county and state and got equal dollars to their neighbors. As I said before, the governance is either highly entrenched locals that have been there forever with special sort of interests or pass-throughs. It's not the easiest place to get something done. And just because of the history of promises without actual delivery, there's a real sense of, we can't have nice things here. So there's a sort of resignment to anything good that walks in the door. And this is all stuff that, just imagine that this is your client and you're trying to provide something and actually kind of arrive at an understanding of what's needed. This is a tough place to be. Also, when you're coming in, as I'm, speaking for myself, with completely different perspective on life and lived experiences.
Yeah, and I think, to Gregory's point, with all of we don't want to just call out the negative factors, but, in kind of shaping some context to the place, I think as a result of many of those things, Gregory, Kirstin, the community itself is alive with sort of this activist and, kind of like forward-thinking, challenging structures, and really finding and creating their own spaces for safety and for self-expression. These are some photos from some of our early engagement with the East Palo Alto community for a project that we're going to be sharing with you a little bit later. This fellow here in the right-hand corner stole all of our hearts and still remains one of our very good friends, Isaiah Phillips, who Gregory has continued to do work with, and we continue to facilitate conversations and relationships. But Gregory, I know from your work there that you were very much inspired by sort of the sort of pursuit of liberation in a way that the community seems to have, operating at different levels and different generations, right?
I would say that, yes. I mean, that more than anything else, and more than any other experience in my career, this project, not just left its mark, but it switched tracks for me. I learned so much from not just the process, but more importantly, the people. And was so inspired by them and what they have to offer, but also really, really frustrated with the conditions that they are in, and trying to change those things with them. So it's been, yes, a learning process that goes on.
Nice. So, after we've shared a little bit here with you about East Palo Alto, we have another little activity here for you all to engage with. So I'm going to stop screen sharing again. Kirstin's going to help to get a link posted in the chat for all to all jump in, so we can get into the Mentimeter. Still a 25-word or a 25-character limit.
But you can write as many words as you want in the chat, or you can speak up. So it's actually the same link as before, and I've just posted it. But this time, what we're going to do is kind of set up a parallel track for this workshop, where we're asking you to think about a project where you would like to serve justice by design. So this is, and we're going to give you opportunities to reflect, to think about ideas for your project and actions that you can take as you listen to us talk about what sort of our process and learnings from these two projects we did in East Palo Alto. So if you have a project you're working on now, that's great. If you have one that's coming up, if you have one you did in the past and you'd like to think about how could we maybe have done things better when it comes to equity and justice. If you're a student and it's a studio project, or if you have none of the above, you can just imagine something. But go ahead now, please, in the Mentimeter at the link in the chat, and put in the project, a location and program type, or you can tell us specifically like one person has done it, the name of the project, that's fine, but you can also say, right, a civil rights museum in San Diego, the Sunnydale Community Center, a school in Boston. Just go ahead and think, take a minute to think, and then let's write the ideas on which projects you want to reflect on in the Mentimeter, please. Is it showing up okay? Let me look at the chat here.
Yeah, I can see. Ooh, that's exciting.
Excellent.
We love the Exploratorium, one of our favorite places.
I taught summer camp there a really long time ago. It's so fun. Great. Pedestrian streets in downtowns, restorative justice center, yeah.
Yes, get it. All right.
Heritage ownership program, the Tenderloin affordable housing, amazing. Richmond air monitoring network.
Sensing follow-up coffee hours with folks here already.
Yeah, that's a good idea. The symphony, amazing. Bayview Community Garden, excellent. All great projects. Maybe, all right, people can keep thinking if you haven't thought of one yet. Equity centers on every campus, love that. So I'll turn it back over to Quinn to keep, to go ahead and start talking through the first project we worked on, the Epicenter project. All Justice, I'd say All Justice 40 projects. Can't quite read it, but that sounds very interesting. Want to hear about that one. So I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you all for thinking about your projects. And keep those in your mind. Yeah, go ahead.
So the first project we'd like to share with you all, the three of us worked on in East Palo Alto, is a project called Epicenter. It's a youth art and music center that was kind of generated in many ways kind of some of the ideas by the community itself. And Gregory, do you want to maybe just provide a little bit more history on kind of the background of Epicenter and its sort of generation and genesis and some of the partners there?
So there was a primary funder, family foundation that's very active in the Bay Area, who had been doing a lot of work in East Palo Alto over the years, largely supporting different youth and environment focused nonprofits and organizations. And at a certain point, working together with Stanford, it became apparent that there was an opportunity to bring these different organizations together and use the arts and culture as a pathway for learning, exploration, education, and advancement. So they created this idea of an epicenter, and they did this through a group of youths coming together before we were involved to start to outline what this center might look like. So we came in with a very rough notion of what that project was, and through our engagement helped sort of shape and breathe some life into that. But we'll go on to what this looked like.
So on that note, with regards to engagement, one of the needs that we kind of identified from working through conversations with folks in different capacities was, gaining trust in engagement is a key it's a key, not just goal, but aspect to sort of the longevity of strategies, like really taking hold and having a place to fit within the context, and that sort of trust building can be quite tricky, especially when that community has kind of been indoctrinated not to trust even themselves at times. And I would also say that much of what we're sharing now has really been born out of these conversations, and we hope that we're not generalizing too much, but this is really kind of a sharing from our own sort of unique experiences, so you might hear different things from different folks. But Gregory, I know that trust in general is something that you continue to navigate in EPA.
I'm working with developers to figure out how. Yeah, I think one of the things that's really fundamental to everything we're about to say is when you walk into a process like this, sort of suspending just being a student of the project and the opportunity, and really being not the expert for a moment, to allow your expertise to actually function well. And in the concept of trust here, really putting yourselves in the shoes of the folks that you're working with and for. And thinking about what does that, like, I'm asking these folks to trust me, but with what? Like, reality is they're entrusting you with a significant piece of their future, a lasting piece of their future. But to earn trust, sometimes it's really critical. Like, they have to see it from you first. So they're putting something in your hands of value. They have something at stake in this relationship. You need to do the same thing. You need to do, and you do that by having an understanding of that culture, what their needs are, what their values are, and sort of operating within that context. And Quinn can explain a little bit of what that showed up as for us.
Yeah, and I think too, some of what we're sharing with you are like strategies that we kind of came up with planning for these different engagements and gatherings, but others are ones that kind of arose out of things that we learned along the way. So much of this is kind of a culmination of those considerations. One of the big things I think is that we found is like partnering with somebody within the community that they already trust, right? That can act as an ambassador for your own process. So, we reached this really beautiful moment after the series of engagements in EPA where Isaiah, who you see in the bottom left, they invited us over to their kind of like hangout clubhouse there, which was somebody's garage with like, chalkboard walls and, sticky notes on the wall and plywood, tables sitting on sawhorses. But it was like, we knew we were at the center. We had been kind of brought into that space. And I think our relationship with Isaiah really started to uncover to us the power of giving voice to the community in our own process. So he led a lot of our engagements. He co-emceed them with us and was very integrated in that. And we found that sort of strategy was really helpful for us too, to start to forge relationships. And it also, I think, started to give us a space to really be candid and be vulnerable with one another and ask very challenging questions once that trust started to be kind of built. And I think as a result of this, it really did create these moments of intimacy and opportunities for shared affinity. But Kirstin, I'm curious too, if there were any things that arose for you throughout this.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to comment on, Isaiah at one point commented to me like, hey, now I've got leading a workshop on my resume. And, so it wasn't just about like partnering with someone local to get our purpose to succeed. It was actually like like empowering a member of the local community, local youth. I think that he got a stipend for his involvement. I think that, and it was actually meaningful skill building and job training what he did during this engagement process. So I think that that's a really great thing that we can, to think about who we're engaging and can we actually provide capacity building for people who are engaged on a project, not just asking for their opinions about this project.
Yeah, how can you leverage the tremendous energy we and communities and clients put into these projects to get them built? Harness that energy. It's already momentum, and direct it towards something that is needed within the community. That takes real intention, but those opportunities are much less heavier lifts than you would imagine.
Yeah, and I think too, in tandem with that, as lucky as we were to have Isaiah as somebody to help forge these relationships of trust, we also encountered other scenarios where there was a lot of mistrust that was deeply, kind of within the DNA of the place, and namely being the police force. That's kind of pervasive throughout many communities of color. But, Gregory in particular has done a lot of work to create spaces for conversation and healing between these different groups of people. And, I think in many ways, it's also starting to find that there are overlapping values and that people can align around. They might not have the same agenda, but the value sets can be a place for jumping off on. So, I think too, in tandem with that, in sort of considering sort of project alignment, in looking at sort of an engagement process, this is a community that is very engaged in the work that they're doing. So we kind of needed to match them where they were at. We felt that it was important to do so. And I think a big part of that is like acknowledging that there's many different day-to-day realities that people are navigating. So as a result, how can we create different spaces to accommodate those different sorts of needs in different environments? So we really tried to make an effort to go where people were already used to and very comfortable with. So we did a lot of our engagement at community centers. Sometimes we were in parks. We actually dovetailed with a community sort of event that happened at a park and set up a booth there, and we were there mixing in with everybody. And also, I think food is one of the key things that people can kind of come around and share. I think we're looking for those opportunities to really create spaces where cross-generational sort of conversation can happen a bit more naturally. And around food and music is something that we have found to be quite effective. Gregory, anything else you want to kind of add in this section here?
No, let's keep moving.
Great. So we have a few more slides here for Epicenter, and sharing sort of our engagement strategies. I think this providing spaces for folks to feel confident in their own participation is really important. Is sitting in a room with everyone at their own table the best way to do that? Maybe, maybe not. Is sitting in a circle? I'm not sure. Being sensitive though to the people that are going to be participating in and doing what we can as designers to design spaces to help for confidence and agency is key. And I think, Gregory, some of that really comes from like stating our intentions at the beginning so people kind of know where we're coming from, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a dialogue. There's no reason why anything should be secret. Again, what the currency in the community is candor. And so you have to model that through everything you do. There's really no value in having an objective that you're trying to pull them towards that they're not aware of. Yeah, and it's also respecting them as equals. They're equal but different. We have different perspectives. But we're all capable of contributing to this effort and needed.
Yeah, this image here on the right of this tattooed arm, I think became one of our guideposts early on as we were pursuing the project. When we were first invited to submit qualifications for it, Gregory was like, "We're buying Quinn a plane ticket and flying him up to East Palo Alto immediately." And I was thrown on a plane and I was flown up there and I landed and I was like, all right, how are we going to get a sense of this place? And I really kind of went out of EPA and went around the fringes and started to just speak with, other organizations. And this person in general, he was born and raised in EPA. He was a chef, and he had this incredible relationship with all these community gardens and started to link us with people in the community. So, you know, I think too, it's like those sort of impromptu conversations with folks can be very meaningful. And it's, I think, about holding space for listening and for people to share. So lastly here, with regards to engagement on EPA, you know, I think this is something that Gregory and I and Kirstin too really try to listen to in our own process, is like, just stay aware of the things that we're unaware of, and know that there's this space of unawareness, and that by doing so that we can really hold, you know, a healthy environment for people to kind of lead and guide us, that we're kind of there as facilitators. And I think that can come from many different things, whether it's small table discussions. You know, I think that supporting different styles of participation is key. This is a photo of Kirstin with her daughter and a community member, and they're spray painting at, you know, at this community event. But through that, like, just informal conversations started to come up, and we started to forge relationships with other sort of community members. And that can also be done in actual workshops, or, you know, just going on a field trip with your sort of community ambassador. We went out to the salt flats in EPA, and it was raining and windy and cold, man. And we all just kind of stood out there and soaked it up together. It was uncomfortable, but at the same time, we were there kind of sharing it together, which was a nice experience.
I think that's, I love what you actually just said. That's a great metaphor for all of this, is just sort of being okay with being uncomfortable. Like, you really have to sit in it sometimes. I think also, well, if you want, you can keep going. I was going to say that the why part is really important. It's really,
I think in tandem,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in tandem with our engagement, you know, as much as, you know, our process that we've continued to hone and stay very critical of, we're always searching for the questions to ask, to start to uncover, you know, what might be invisible. And I think a lot of that is also related to, you know, wellness considerations as it relates to what the building itself is going to be. And Kirstin has played a really key role in starting to merge some of these value sets with an actual built environment. So Kirstin, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, will do. And then let's make sure we get back to a question that came in the chat, which was what to tell about some engagement strategies that did not work. So we'll pin that one and come back to it in reflections. So yeah, we wanted to talk about, you know, we're very process focused, and at the same time, you know, the proof is in the pudding, to use an archaic expression. What are the actual building design features that we feel serve justice and we're successful in getting at this desire to do right by the community and to serve equity and justice? So there's kind of 4 points that arise for Epicenter for me. One of them is just very simply to get it built, right? This project was so much driven by the community, and the youth said, like, this is what we want an arts center. So we need to deliver on the community vision first, and that can mean a lot of things. It can be very complicated to get a building done, as all of you probably have experienced. So it has to either meet the budget, or you have to creatively find ways for additional funds, which I do think bears mentioning that a lot of the time kind of environmentally sustainable features are easier to get funding for, and can actually help people add budget to a project to ultimately get more done for the community. Things like a PV array, sometimes like someone will raise their hand to just fund that, so it doesn't have to be a hit against the budget of the project. Then jump hurdles as they arise. We had lots of hurdles arise, including that the city of East Palo Alto, while we were working on entitlement, had a moratorium on development. So the project was going to have to just stop. And the reason why is that the city, with its kind of junior water rights with SFPUC, just simply ran out of water. There wasn't enough water to be adding any new demand in the city. So our project was stopped. And we were ultimately able to, again, kind of as an example of environmental sustainability, helping to like facilitate social justice and equity. Like we were able to show quantitatively how little water we were going to use. We were able to include a rainwater harvesting system. And we looked at how the site had been entitled for a big multifamily development. At one point, we knew how much water that was going to use, and we said, look, we're going to use 1% of the water that previous development was going to use. We should, like, I think you can really just go ahead and let us build this project. And they said yes. And then ultimately, the city was able to lift the moratorium a couple of years later because they were able to negotiate some additional water sources. That's a whole other story if people want to hear it. And then at the same time, so we need to get the project built, and we also need to protect the investment, because it's not like another opportunity like this is going to come up the next day for this community. So designing for future climate, flood resilience, we have flood issues in East Palo Alto. So we looked at designing for future climate. We elevated the building above a certain year of flood. The lower level is concrete, the upper level is wood, kind of making a balance between carbon mitigation and climate adaptation. And we also did some sizing of some of the systems for future climate. Next slide. We'll go a little faster on the next one. Can I have the next one, Quinn? There we go. More directly thinking about people, we really wanted to have inclusive and supportive design for the people using this building. So we thought about a number of different factors across kind of social, physical, cognitive needs. We thought this is really more than just a youth arts center. It's a resource for the community and a placekeeper for the community. So we wanted to invite in diverse groups of folks, and also for the youth, it's beneficial to have a presence of elders in the space. So the cafe helps with that. There are kind of a lot of different niches in the building, and ways to be with lots of people, ways to be alone, ways to be, creating and be loud, and ways to be reflective. So and when we think about comfort in buildings, there's a whole history of kind of really sort of racist and sexist ideas about comfort, right? The way that we came up with typical thermostat set points was from research done on like European men in a long time ago, and what makes them comfortable doesn't make everybody comfortable. So having a way that people can change the conditions, operate a window, move around, helps to make sure that, helps us save energy, because we can expand the thermostat set points in the ambient space, but also helps make sure that people can kind of find their comfort. It was also just a really big deal, this thing Gregory said about people feeling like, we can't really have nice things. Like, this is, we really wanted to make a statement with this building that like this community deserves the best. This is a place, it's a really quality facility. It's certified LEED Platinum, and we said it has to be platinum because like this community deserves the best. And that was a discussion in the workshops. And it is something, the director has talked a lot about people coming into the theater and just going like, I cannot believe that we have this here in East Palo Alto. So that's a great thing. Next. There's the Quinn spoke about, and Gregory as well, about there was this chemical plant, bromic plant in the community, and I want to emphasize, you can see the age of the folks who were in that protest image. The youth of this community kicked out the chemical plant. Like, they worked really hard and they succeeded in getting it shut down. And we needed to respect that when we were thinking about this project. The site that ultimately became available is a site that has chemical contamination. And so it was extremely important to us that, and I was a broken record kind of saying, are we sure? Are we sure that nobody's going to be exposed to contamination? Are we sure that we've encapsulated it and removed, so there was a 3 or 4 step strategy to make sure that no one would have any exposure to the past contamination on the site. And also we don't want the community to go through that and then, have them have bad chemical exposures in the building. So we tried to do a good job with healthy material selection, and also other air quality considerations, such as making sure that when this community has a lot of particulate pollution from cars, there's also smoke season. So we said, yeah, we need mechanical ventilation, but we don't want to have that on 100% of the time. So we have contact switches so that if people open the windows, it shuts off the cooling system, and then if they close them, it comes back on. The last slide, please. And lastly, going right back to what we said at the beginning, fighting climate change is a really critical move for justice. So we wanted to make sure that this building was a net zero carbon building in operations. So it's an all electric building. We did a lot of work on kind of passive systems and siting of the building, understanding the wind and sun. And then having done all those things, we put a big PV array on the roof, and we also made sure that the project was purchasing green power for any electricity use that might be beyond what the PV array could produce. And then we did some thinking about reducing embodied carbon. I would say that that's one thing that we're doing a little bit more rigorously now. In terms of thinking about embodied, we were a little more focused on operating carbon. I think that's the last one. So back to this question, kind of reflections on the process. What didn't work, or what do we do differently? I just wanted to make one comment that I think in a workshop, like I remember one workshop where we were doing things that we felt like were really good, engaging activities for youth, and we were, we had our building blocks and we were running our workshop, but there were still some kids who were kind of hanging around the edge, like they just didn't really feel like they could engage in that. It was kind of the younger kids who were there, and in that particular workshop, like I ended up, I wasn't leading the activity at the time. I ended up taking them outside, and we just like drew with chalk on the ground. So we're able to actually give their ideas that way. So I do think that it's helpful sometimes to have someone, and that's not the only workshop where I've kind of noticed like certain people just weren't really, things weren't working with people, and it was helpful to have somebody who was able to like jump and try something different in a sidebar. What do you guys think about other lessons learned, or anything that didn't work?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, Corey. I would challenge that and say that, we're kind of always trying to figure out what works. It's kind of a process of discovery. And sometimes when something might not necessarily, I guess, go our way or go as planned, I think that's an opportunity to really learn from, and kind of adapt from. So like, for instance, one of the things with regards to the Epicenter project is the program that was given to us was prescribed. It had already been kind of cooked and baked, and it was our sort of responsibility to start to figure out how can these relationships really and adjacencies help to really meet the impact and the values that we were hearing. And I would say, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the next project, is like holding a space to be critical of what you're given is pretty key, right? Like, well, first of all, how did that program get generated? Like, what were the things that went into it? Who cooked it? Who made it? What was the process that went into that? Because you can actually find and discover in doing that and unpacking it
that things may have been missed, or there might be a specific pathway that's started to open that really needs to be pursued more. So I don't know, for me, it's like a constant sort of aspect of discovery when it comes to these sorts of things. Gregory, did you want to share out anything?
I mean, I think the diagram you're seeing up on screen is a process of a lot of the stuff that we've learned over the course of a few of these projects, which is efficiency. Like, there's the efficiency and effectiveness conversation. And when you're working within a community or an organization that is not well organized, that is highly complex system, you need to be working in a very supple way. And the benefit of working in a supple way is the end result tends to be a little bit more resilient. But it is in direct opposition to those proposals that we put together and staffing plans that really, this is expensive work, or can be. So the real search is, how do we build in efficiency to this? What can we be doing in parallel with these efforts? Where have we wasted a lot of time? And how can we trim that time without trimming some of the value that we get from it? It's a real struggle, and it's something that every client asks us to do in advance of starting a project, but we always make sure that we engage the client in that process of designing the process for them. So that's a big lesson, and it's never going to
Yeah, for sure. I think that's good, Fisher, too. It's like working early on with whoever the client or owner might be, or clients, to really calibrate some of those expectations or steps, milestones that are going to be taken throughout the process, and understanding too, like, what's kind of the chain of the filter of decision making is also kind of key, right? You go into these engagements, you might have a room of 50 people, and everyone's going to share something, and you can't meet everybody's sort of aspiration or dream or desire. So starting to create early on in the process kind of an outline of what that journey is going to look like, and starting to establish what that ecosystem and kind of way of navigating might be. And this very much, like, in reflecting on Epicenter and our process, started to inform very much what we started to do on our next project, which we're going to share with you after we do another little mini activity. We're going to pause here a little bit because we've been talking at you all here for a bit.
Really quick
so Kirstin, oh yeah.
Just really quick thing. You have to consider yourself as part of that ecosystem, and similarly, like, you've got to. It's really helpful to look at your colleagues and your the consultant team that you're working with, and get to, like, what is their core, what do they really offer here, and how can we have them participate and provide that in a very like distinct way. Like, when and how do we draw them in for what?
Nice, that's good. Great. So Kirstin, did you want to help? Should I pass this over to you to help facilitate this next activity?
The next slide should have the link to the Miro for the next activity.
Let me just, I've already got it pulled up here, so I can just go over to it right now. Here we go.
Okay, and we need to give people
just 1 second here
in the chat.
So we're going to invite you all into a Miro space to work together. We're going to give you a quick little tutorial here for those who have not used it before. But in the chat, you can click this link and it will bring you into this board. Over here on the left-hand side is, kind of your toolbar. There's some sticky notes here. I'm just going to put a blank one here right now. You can just copy paste that if you want. Just click copy paste. And with the question here, feel free to
showing up.
Start responding. And there's other things. You can use shapes. You can use whatever to kind of communicate your thoughts. But we're just going to hold a little time here to share.
Right. So this could be, things that you heard from our Epicenter process that you thought seemed particularly effective. These can be things that you've tried yourself, new ideas that you have. Just put together a set of what we think are some good practices for.
And don't be shy. If anyone's like dealing with any sort of technical issues or frustrations with Miro, let us know. We can help advise on what to do. Ooh, I always get excited seeing all of the visiting builders and designers in here.
I'll answer one of the questions out loud while you guys are working on this. There was a question about how we got the project. I think it's noteworthy that in two ways. So Quinn and I were working together at a firm, and Quinn was sort of leading a project for our office in Birmingham, and the client and project coordinator was the same on both of these projects. So I'm just going to sum it up as the landscape in Birmingham was quite difficult. And the way that Quinn navigated that successfully made quite an impression on Deborah and sort of lined up with her understanding of what this project would need. So we put a team together that actually did not include Kirstin. Kirstin actually came with the project. So our team was selected. We had a wonderful environmental consultant. However, you know, Kirstin had already made quite an impression in the community with some prior work on a sort of needs assessment. And Deborah also astutely, you know, noted that Kirstin has a way with making, with really paying attention to, you know, who she's working with and putting the material in a way that they can relate to it and understand it. Even for me, Kirstin was the first person to really humanize sustainability, you know, and engineering. And it's one of my favorite things to do is to work with Kirstin, because it's just always, you know, opens up new worlds. So, and she does that without making you feel like an idiot. So,
Thank you, Gregory.
Yeah.
Very sweet of you.
Ooh, somebody knows the comment function in here. I'm chasing the commenter. Nice. Ooh, yes, the translated material for meetings is key. That's a really good one. And being sensitive of who's in the room. That's something that I think, honestly, Gregory, Kirstin, we could probably do a better job of is trying to get a sense. I think a lot of that too is just like trying to get a sense of who might be in the room ahead of time. You know, that's one other thing too that we've definitely learned in our continued engagement is like getting a roster of who's going to be there, who are the key sort of movers and shakers, you know, other sort of community members. It can be very helpful. So you get a sense of the landscape of like the different agendas that might be in the room. Can be very helpful. Nice. Ooh, there's great things in here.
One thing that's great along those lines, Quinn, and whoever made that comment is, you know, doing your research, just not only knowing, you know, the who and where people's heads are at, but also like in East Palo Alto, as I mentioned in the beginning, people are tired of stating the same problems over and over again. So it sort of behooves you, you've got to figure out a way to talk about some of those things without, you know, pretending, without having to rediscover them, so that you can start in a new space.
Nice. So I think we'll spend just a little bit more time here. I know we're coming up, we're just past the top of the hour, and we've got one more section to go through. This is great. Appreciate you all jumping in here with us on these.
I love the cloud. Whoever did
awesome.
That's really true, and it's really important to encourage your clients to, you know, compensate in some meaningful way, and that can look a lot of different ways for engagement. You know, we forget that money isn't the only resource that's needed. You know, you can create pathways with, you know, make an effort to create internship programs. If anyone is interested in internships, check out Pilot City. They are very, very active in the Bay Area, but their program is unlike any other that I've seen. It is very, very well thought out.
Yes, Cindy, these are great. Love this. Good stuff.
Does anyone?
All right.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, we probably should keep going. But
Yeah,
I want to
maybe we, what were you saying,
continue.
Kirstin?
Well, I just want to give an opportunity if anybody wanted to like highlight something, speak up, and if you want to comment on any of these. And do take the time to read the other
this one's
ones
fun.
that people are putting in.
I like seeing this equanimity one in here. Fisher, you and I were kind of talking about this yesterday.
Yeah, showing up with equanimity. We're not different from each other.
Mm.
Worked well on a favela project. Awesome.
Yes, make people laugh. Okay, we know what's up. What some good music and good food will do for sure. Some really bad dad jokes. All
Food
right.
and childcare for meetings. That's a good one.
Oh, childcare.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing and we're going to move on to the next section here. Thank you all for your contributions.
And we will come back to
We've
this one
got
more time.
Yeah, and this next section is a little bit tighter, but we're excited to share with you this next one. So let me just get this queued up here. 1 second. All right. Press play on this. Oh, press play on this here. Sorry, technical difficulties. All right, here we go. All right. Share screen. So this next project is also in East Palo Alto. This is a project that was, they kind of pinged us as a result. The client, or I guess the client rep, pinged us. They were working with another architecture firm and were really struggling to develop a kind of meaningful sort of design that really kind of encapsulated the spirit of what they had been striving for. So this is a project with the Ravenswood Middle School District. And the sort of partner in this is the Forever Young Foundation. And they have a series of what are called 8 to 80 zones that are throughout the country, predominantly in underserved communities, that really are looking to provide pathways for digital learning to communities, youth, in most specifically, that might not have had that otherwise. The majority of the other projects have been renovations or TIs. This is their first sort of ground up project. So they were really looking for a partner to come on to help in the project sort of definition sort of phase and figuring out what this thing was going to be. Gregory, anything else you'd like to add before we go on to some of the highlights?
I think one of the biggest things that we had to overcome, two of the biggest things, was a complex client. Like, we actually didn't know who the client was, who was giving us marching orders until deep into and the client didn't know who the client was. The client had to actually form an organization in order to engage us and lead us. And the other thing was, you know, it's really tough when you come in to a project and there's already a design there. And there was a real fixed notion.
That's right, yeah.
This is all we need. You know, someone came in and promised, oh, we build you this box, da da da. And you know, they got the sense that this isn't quite right. We had some working experience with these guys on this epicenter project. We know they can infuse this with life. The problem is that infuse this part is fixed. So we had the challenge of having them reprogram for themselves what this was and what it needed to be. Leave behind this idea of what is going to be, well, what's possible with a fixed amount of dollars that they have.
For sure. And the main sort of programmatic thrust is that a part of the 8 to 80 zone sort of programming is that it is esports sort of centered kind of curriculum. It's, you know, really to provide pathways in that capacity, but through our conversations, we really saw this as a digital sort of learning environment. But also from our engagement, we started to hear a lot from the students in particular, like they didn't necessarily just want to be stuck around or behind your computer or just be in a traditional sort of esports sort of environment. So a lot of our work was starting to kind of unpack what the desires and aspirations really were. So, you know, in drawing from some of what we learned from the Epicenter project, this was really looking at starting to implement some of those things. And I think part of what we really looked at in this sort of process on the 8 to 80 project was looking at creating kind of multiple modes of engagement and different ways of engaging, not just sitting at a table and kind of sharing ideas or asking for feedback or input, but how can we really generate this together? So we used a wide range of techniques and sort of activities. The one on the bottom left-hand corner was actually a visioning sort of exercise where all of the participants sent ahead of time a bunch of images that they felt represented the project, and we brought some as well. And we posed questions to groups, and then the people had to answer those questions with the images on the table. And it was amazing to see the conversations that came out of it. It wasn't necessarily the product of what we were looking for. We were really trying to facilitate a kind of creative space. And like, it went as far as like us thinking about how people were making these, right? Like, I don't think we had any tape. Maybe we had a little tape, but we didn't have any scissors. Everyone had to tear things with their hands, right? It wasn't about making things perfect. It was like, this needs to be messy and let's just do it. So, you know, we really thought, you know, I think constructively about designing the actual sort of activity itself. Another one we did, which we've used in multiple occasions, which we've found to be quite exciting and very insightful, is a sort of blind shuffle, and it's kind of the second one that you see here. And the idea is that it's a piece of paper that you answer a question, and then we fold it up and we move it around the room, and then somebody else answers the next question, but they reflect on the previous person's response, and then we fold them up and shuffle them again.
And can provide
before you know it, yeah. And before you know it, it's like this exquisite corpse of ideas, and nobody has any ownership of it anymore. It's been collectively built, totally anonymous. But when we go back and read these, it's like so insightful. It's like one of my favorite things that we get to do out of, I think, our process.
It also,
Right.
one of the other thing it does, aside from sort of aligning, creating this, you know, instant presto magico alignment, is it cracks open, you know, sort of fixed notions of the way something is. It allows you to get outside of yourself for a minute, which is a really important space to sort of occupy when you walk into, you know, a workshop like this.
Yeah, and I think what's critical to underscore what Quinn said about anonymity, all these different workshop exercises, and a lot of us use sticky notes in workshops and stuff. And I think what's the thing that's one of the most important things about it, one, everybody gets to contribute at the same time, right? You don't have you get like more ideas out. But two, it is anonymous. And so, you know, the loudest person in the room has just, you know, and the quietest person in the room have the same ability to contribute in writing. And in the end, you make something that represents the group consensus. You don't, you know, you've empowered everybody to participate equally, and then you have a thing that the whole group said, this is what we think. So all these different exercises are getting at that co-creation and kind of.
There are a lot of, when you're working in communities in particular, and also in organizations, you've got hierarchical structures. And sometimes it's communities I found in organizations are inverted, where in a lot of communities, the leadership won't actually say something because they're waiting to see what they need to say by listening to the constituency. So if you can get them to talk in advance, that's really important. Anonymity provides them. The other piece, and otherwise generating that, let me tell you from experience, it takes a long time. The other piece is organizational, where you've got, you know, the county supervisor sitting there and the director of libraries, you know, afraid to say something with incredible perspective because it may be counter to. So you're giving folks the freedom to say things that they.
For sure. I think one other thing and part of this too is as a result of the pandemic, we had to be very flexible with the sort of modes that we were using. So we did a lot of online stuff, and we also were very flexible to be kind of outdoors engaging with folks. Fischer, do you want to touch on this one? I've got a truck driving by that's quite loud. I'm going to mute.
Yeah, sure. What are we on? So So clarity of purpose. Again, here we had a multi-headed client in a way that didn't know who was client. We had actually a client behind our forward-facing client who was who thought they were the funders in a way, and they thought they were doing one thing, but the folks who were working with them and for them developing their projects had a different trajectory in mind. So it was really important that we just take a step back and really look at the fundamentals. And the fundamentals had to be defined through a collective conversation, which was essentially, you know, we're looking at a continuum of youth development and what are the components of developing youth and where are the needs and holes within this community. And the opportunities, where are the discrepancies between what these folks have and what's being offered around them. So one of the things that really helped us from the get-go, and we do this all the time, and I'm sure a lot of you do, is just mapping the project ecosystem. It's amazingly productive to sit down with the client, kind of both work in parallel. You do your research, you map out the different areas of impact and influence for this project, and a lot of times that creates an awareness on the part of the client of either resources for contribution or potential partnerships. All that's great. The other thing is unpack everything. So if somebody asks and tells you we need to increase the capacity of the theater, you better unpack what capacity looks like, because inside of that is tremendous opportunity to shift needs to some other place that could pick that up. Again, you know, like we tend to have fixed ideas. We are very efficient pattern seekers for a reason, but our role really is to, you know, break that up for a minute so that we can get on a more efficient path and reframe opportunities. The other thing is gathering the stories. For this project, it was really important to hear from the youth. And getting to youth is really tricky. We needed some sort of ambassadors and advocates to do that. But once you get there, you know, what you find is that the youth in this particular case is a highly respected voice to hear. So capturing those stories, those were the stories that actually had really the most weight in directing us on this project. And then the last thing I'll say, which actually we threw in this morning last minute, was stay away from architecture. It's hard to believe that we didn't actually think of that first, but you know, a lot of times the client just wants to see what something looks like, and so do you. And in a way, you really, like, it's okay to be in the background iterating, that's fine. But really, you should be pushing to keep those notions that you have, the sort of formal notions, at bay as long as possible. What's interesting is really to watch the ideas emerge into a kind of organization that is aligned with program, because you're creating program that is value and function based rather than, you know, I need 6 offices for these 7 staff.
Right. And I think part of that too is, you know, in implementing those strategies, I think collectively as a team, something emerged that nobody had been thinking about, which was great for us. And I think, you know, in the mind of, you know, one of the client's sort of spheres, they had in their mind this esports center of purple lights with, you know, completely dark, very, very, you know, masculine, testosterone driven, lots of Doritos and stuff. It was like all of these things, but like, this is a place of wellness. It's a place of continuing, you know, youth development. So why not invite nature? Why not do these things? Students had, you know, were advocating for spaces outside. So it was this like clash of these different sort of expectations, which for us was like fertile ground to realize something out of that sort of tension. And I think too, you know, on this last note here, it's like, you know, it's again kind of going with these notions of expectations, and that being mindful about how we are implementing and how you can implement engagement strategies to like be the bridge between those different directives and also uncover those various objectives. So, you know, one of the things that we did, you know, midway through this project is we did site analysis with the group. And the group collectively was like, this site that's been selected is not the right place for this building to go. We need to move it somewhere else. So we paused and we did site analysis elsewhere. We relocated the building. And in doing so, it unlocked all of these other opportunities on how the project could be
kind of an igniter for the whole campus and for the community at large. And all of a sudden, people started to see that this wasn't about like making sure that they had their specific garage door where they wanted it. It was like, oh my God, this is a part of this larger ecosystem of impact. And that really kind of led some things.
Let's make sure we get, since we have 8 minutes left.
Okay.
We should.
This is sort of modeling what you want to create. So, I mean, it says confidence and resilience is what we created, which is great. But it took tremendous confidence to actually suggest to the client that they have the site in the wrong place. And with that, you know, in the midstream, it meant actually potentially derailing the project for ourselves. But what it ended up creating was a new world of opportunity that is really.
Yep. So, you know, in tandem with some of our strategies, you know, again, it's like what is starting to be realized. Now, this project is just coming out of concept design, so it's not built yet. We're moving into schematic, but there are key sort of objectives and criteria that have been really leading us. And I think, you know, when we're thinking about, as we had mentioned earlier, like, is this like testosterone, masculine Doritos environment the best place for students to be learning? Maybe not. Let's look at healthier places for people to be that are more equitable, more open to the environment, that are really, this notion of fitness came up, right? Like esports gaming and digital programming requires a completely different type of skill set, but it in itself is a fitness, right? So this notion of fitness really became something that was guiding a lot of our thinking. And again, also kind of this notion of healthy materials. But as thinking about this sort of social ecosystem, there's also sort of the environmental kind of behaviors of the project itself. Did you want to speak to that, Kirstin?
Yeah, and just, I mean, I just want to highlight that in challenging exactly what programs needed to be in this building, we're also kind of challenging a paradigm that's sort of fundamentally unhealthy, but also in like a computing or gaming kind of paradigm, right? Saying we're trying to say, you know, kids need these tech skills, and it's going to be really advantageous for them economically if they get them. But how maybe we can create a paradigm in which you can learn tech skills and have connection to view and nature, and have opportunities to move around, you know, and eat healthy food. So it's this, I think it's a great opportunity for that. So yeah, we really said in making sure that we're really clear about vision and goals at the beginning of the project and getting everybody on board with those goals. In this, it was pretty much simply, can we be the healthiest building for the students? Can we be the healthiest building for the planet? And for all the reasons that those things are intertwined. So we're aiming for carbon neutral operations. We're aiming for low carbon structure. That's a little bit complicated in terms of getting materials donated. So, you know, navigating that space, maybe a hybrid structure. We still have to watch our water use in East Palo Alto very carefully. We also want to think about other species as stakeholders here, and really make space for nature, and that's only helping students' well-being and teachers' well-being, in addition to, but it's also saying like, hey, while we make habitat for ourselves, let's make habitat for other species too.
Yeah, I think it's an acknowledgement also of like of highlighting that we are a part of nature, right? Nature's not outside the doors, and it's out there in the world. Like, we are a part of it, and I think that resiliency kind of can come from that sort of awareness and awakening sort of as well. I think one of the challenging things that we were met with on this project, given digital learning and this need and desire to be connected to the environment, were lighting controls. So that was one of the other key sort of strategies that we've really been investigating, and partnered with Aeroplan in this to help kind of our thinking. So, you know, within the space itself, there's going to be a lot of different mobile actionable sort of item or sort of strategies through the use of curtains that the students will be able to control. There's going to be blackout shades so that they can control the light at different times. We've got large overhangs. We're really trying to leverage north light. So, you know, this really is thought to be a tunable environment, and also an environment that is facilitating learning by action, right? So the client rep was very interested in like, this whole building should be something to learn from. So how can the students tailor their own lighting conditions? How can we kind of, have overhead rigging that's going to allow them to set up lighting in different ways. So in a way, the overall project became kind of an ambassador for learning in that way. And I think, lastly here, to kind of share with you all. Oh, sorry.
Well, I just want to put in a plug for universal design too, because we didn't necessarily highlight that, but I think that we're thinking harder about universal design, going beyond ADA in this project and making sure that people with different abilities can kind of access things in the same way through the same pathways, that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Progress there too. Good.
So this is a diagram that has emerged for us and that Gregory has been honing. We've only got a few more minutes here. So Fischer, did you just want to do kind of just a quick overview on this as kind of a departing point here?
Yeah, sure. I think this is really, again, just sort of distilling, the inequality and justice conversation to something really essential. Across like a lot of community engagement and community building work that I've been doing, which is outside of architecture, what's missing, is a sort of awareness and understanding. It's a really powerful tool. If you're aware of something, you have an in-depth understanding of the mechanics, then you're able to actually act on that piece. But then the next trick is like access. So you might be aware and knowledgeable about something, but you go to speak in front of city council and you get your 2 minutes, and it's thank you very much. Go sit down. That's the end of that. So those access points are really key. Being aware of what are the pathways to being an effective voice. So our job as facilitators within the space of architecture, design, whatever it is we're doing, is really to surface those opportunities, bring the awareness, help make it collective and shared, because there's more power in that way. Faction is disempowering, and then create those new pathways. And then, the 8 to 80 zone project is a tool, and so is actually also the process that we led folks through. Allowing folks to be aware of their resources, it enables them to grow those resources with intent, and it allows them to deploy them and understand their agency, even in small ways, but just knowing that your actions and your thoughts can have an impact is the beginning of something great.
Nice. Thanks, Fischer. Great. Well, we're here at time. We posted a little question there in the chat as a parting sort of thing for you all to consider. But I believe, Charlie, this concludes where we're at.
Yes, well, before we turn it back over to Charlie, I just want to invite people. We had intended to do this in Miro, but I invite each of you to just write in the chat one strategy, that either something that was mentioned or something you thought of or something somebody else thought of in Miro that you actually are planning to take forward and try on your project that you imagined. It helps us all to take action when we say, like, in this kind of environment, like, yeah, I'm going to do this. So I invite you to put it in that as we wrap up.
I encourage everyone to write away, because this has been super stimulating for me, and I'm sure everyone else. And I want to thank our panelists today for, more than anything, not just being here, but all the efforts you guys have done to help right some wrongs that have been going on for a long, long time. So I think future conversations for us are how to expand this beyond your smaller projects to everyone's way of thinking about design. And that's kind of an educational thing that I don't know how we overcome in the architectural and other communities. It's bigger than just architecture and design. So
share your wins. Architecture has traditionally been such a secretive space where we just boast, and design, and it's just so refreshing to be open and exchange.
Right.
Set your ideas free. You made them, you learn them, you'll get more. But yeah, and it just allows you to have greater impact. And be impacted by setting an example.
Do you guys teach, like, in the universities?
I teach. I do, yeah. I've been teaching, and it's part of what we're also looking at doing through Just Act, is starting to really push some curriculum development and find ways to get some of these skill sets and tools and ways of thinking in the hands of youngsters early on. They're going to be the pioneers and leaders of this moving forward. So that's definitely
Right.
one of our key areas we're looking to continue to break into.
I want to do
Super. Well, we're over time, and I suppose technically we're supposed to shut down. So
that. Thank
unfortunately,
you, everyone.
we'll have to do that. But thanks everyone for joining us. And thank you, Quinn and Gregory and Kirstin, for all of this. It's been fantastic.
Absolutely.
And
Thanks for
everyone who's
holding the
attended
space.
today. So, all right.
Yes. Thank you all.
Take care, everyone.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Onward.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.